Welcome, everyone. This is Pastor Bob, and it's time for our midweek message. You may have noticed that I had a midweek message yesterday, and we had a problem with the audio file on that, and so I had to make a choice. I could either figure it out because on one of the platforms it was having some issues, or I could just re-record it, and hopefully this one would be a little bit better. So I decided to just re-record it. So if you saw the one from yesterday, this one will be similar. However, when I preach or when I do these videos, I try to speak from the heart. So because of that, even though I may have prepared notes or a prepared sermon, there could be quite a bit of difference. So maybe you'll pick out something new. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, what I want to talk about is the Christmas story, which I immerse myself in every year. It's only found in two places, Matthew and Luke. And it's a remarkable story. You have a story of complete faith and complete trust from Mary and Joseph. I mean, when you look at this story, you've got them traveling by foot 80 miles away for a census, for some government regulation. And then they don't have any space, so they have to give birth in probably one of the worst places. I guess you'd be grateful they at least had shelter, but they're around animals and the smells of animals and everything animals do. And, Mary's a young girl who is about to give birth out of wedlock, which was back then a huge social taboo. Joseph that wants to put her away. After they give birth, they have to live as refugees in Egypt, a land where they don't know the customs or the language or anything. It really is a difficult story. And what I pull from this story is if there was anybody that had a reason to complain, God, why are you doing this? Why do you allow bad things to happen to good people? Why do you make us go through this? This is not what we thought. We thought, if we followed you, we'd be healthy and wealthy. And if anybody had a long list of grievances or complaining about what God was trying to do, it was them. Yet Mary says, Lord, do to me what you will. I mean, the ultimate faith and trust. Joseph, same thing, goes right along with it. And this is a season of joy. We're supposed to celebrate all that God did through Mary and Joseph's faith and trust. God used those two people to literally transform the world. He brought in Jesus Christ, who became God incarnate, who's through teaching, life, death, and resurrection, quite literally transformed the world. And I've noticed that Christians, when we're supposed to be filled with the fruit of the Spirit, peace, joy, love, hope, self-control, all of those. And during a season where we're supposed to celebrate joy, we often do the opposite. We complain. And it's not just during the Christmas season. We all have a tendency to do this. I think it's a cultural thing anymore. One of the things I've noticed when we've had foreign exchange students from other countries, they come over here, and from their perspective, we have everything. And we have massive grocery stores filled with food, and we can order anything we want anywhere in the world and have it here in a matter of moments or days. And yet Christians in particular, we complain. And what I see God doing, excuse me, every 500 years, the churches go through major changes. And I think the church is going through a major change now. And what happens is sometimes instead of being like Mary and Joseph and saying, God, you want to use your church to transform the world, just like you did through Mary and Joseph. And you want to do great things, and you want to bring through the mission of redeeming the world and bringing people into salvation and proclaiming the gospel and spreading the love of Christ, all the things God is trying to do in the world today. And instead of being like Mary and Joseph and say, Lord, use me, or in the words of the famous hymnist, here I am, Lord, we often do the opposite, which is complain. Matter of fact, in my first church was a church where they were known as a pastoring church. They could not keep pastors and they could not keep staff. And this is a true story. And talking with the leadership there, it wasn't that they had a whole lot of internal conflict. There was just a lot of complaining. And you would get these different groups complaining about different things and then complaining about each other. It was this really weird dynamic. And there was a program available at the time for Christian churches for a time such as this. And it was called 30 Days Without Complaining. And it was a really neat program. It was fun, for one. It went through, how a Christian is supposed to live and view the world and be used by God and things like that. It had a jar you would keep at home, and every time you complained, you put a little bit of money into it, and then at the end of the 30 days, you would give that money to a charity of your choice. There was a purple wristband that you could wear every day to remind you to not be a complainer. And it was a fun program. We had a lot of fun with it. And it helped us realize that as Christians, we can be complainers sometimes. And it is tough. I mean, especially now where the church in America is declining, our complaints, we complain about, the hymns we sing or the color of the carpet, or I want to sing 2 verses, I want to sing 4, or how the pastor preaches, or, when you're a pastor and you got, let's say, 400 people, you got 400 different views of what you should say, what you should do, how you should dress, how you should look. I mean, you got 400 wildly different views. And so sometimes complaints can arise out of that. That's just churches. And yet we're doing all this complaining. It's almost like complaining about a light bulb being burnt out on the third deck of the Titanic, where we should be looking at God and saying, God, use us to bring your mission and purpose into the world, especially in a time such as this, because even with all the division among Christians, the world needs the Christmas story: hope, peace, love, joy. And all the divisions among Christians, we can all agree on this: everyone needs Jesus. And our world would look very different today if we just followed those red letters. We just taught, preach, and practice those red letters and proclaim those red letters. But anyway, we don't. We sometimes complain. And unfortunately, complaining has a few negative effects. And Mary and Joseph, certainly out of anybody, had the right to complain. And but they didn't. They were used by God. But the 4 negative effects are this. Number one, complaining often reflects a deficit or a lower level of spiritual maturity. Mary and Joseph said to God, use me, do with what you will. Lord, not my will, but yours. And Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane did the same thing. It was funny, if you look throughout the biblical story, there's been a lot of complainers. You look at Jonah, God is saying, I want you to go to Nineveh and redeem these people. And Jonah starts complaining, I don't want to do that. Those are the kind of people I don't like. They're the wrong skin color. They're the wrong political persuasion. They're the wrong way. What's God do? Well, you know the rest of the story. He didn't put up with it. Or you look at when God went to Moses, and he says, Moses, I want to use you to free my people from Egypt. And Moses first says, well, I'm not a very good speaker. He starts complaining. I can't do that because I don't have the skills or the tools or ability. Yet eventually he gives in and God uses him. But it isn't long before then the Hebrew people start complaining. They're complaining about the food and the weather and just about everything. They're grumbling and upset. And first time Moses turns his back, goes up on the mount to talk to God of all people. What do? They start complaining. They give in to their complaints. They say, well, it would be better if we were back in Egypt. So they start crafting an Egyptian deity, a golden calf. Moses comes down from the mountain, livid. God, livid. And so, but complaining that, when God is trying to do some big things in a church or in the world or in the Christmas story, you're going to have complainers. But what it does is, and this is number one, is it disrupts the mission of the church. It reflects a low level of spiritual maturity because we want our will to be done, not God's. We want to put our preferences higher than what God teaches. And that's something that Mary and Joseph did not do. They put their whole lives aside and said, God, let's do this. You're doing some radical things and we want to be part of it. They did not want to disrupt the mission of the church and what God was trying to do based on preferences or comfort or some other attribute. The other thing it does with complaining, unfortunately, and I think we all have seen this somewhere in our peer circle, is complaining often isolates the complainer. As a church, we are supposed to be, one of our many tasks is building healthy communities. And that means lifting everybody up. The biblical word for that is edification. But what happens is with complainers, because most people, and you know this from your work experience or even in your family circles, people don't want to be around a complainer. And sadly, those people become isolated. And they may not even realize it. Just people quit answering the phone because they don't want to hear it, or they avoid that person. And sadly, if you have any family or organization where they get into a culture of complaining, you'll have those who are isolated. And that's the opposite of what the church should be doing. The church should be lifting people up, encouraging one another, blessing one another. When people come to a church or serve a church, they should feel like they're doing God's work and feel good about it. It shouldn't be the other way around. And so we, as a church, need to make sure we're developing a culture where people feel uplifted and we keep our petty differences at home. And the last thing I want to talk about, and complaining never accomplishes anything. If you look, Mary and Joseph, what if Mary said, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to do this, God. I was about to have start a family and have put together a life with Joseph, and we were going to have a big party, and I had this whole different projection of my life." And Joseph says, What are you talking about?" Or Moses, if God would have gave in to Moses's complaining, the Hebrews never would have got out of Egypt. I mean, when you look at all of the biblical characters God has used, whether it was Peter or Paul, if God would have said, "Stop and listen to their complaining," nothing would have got done. And so we realize that complaining doesn't accomplish anything. Sometimes constructive criticism can, but complaining almost never does. The only thing it accomplishes is puts a stymie on God's will or his mission, or isolates the actual complainer, which is neither is anything we want to do. And the reason I mention this is because we are in the spirit of joy, and we want to focus on that. We are in the season of joy, and we want to focus on that. What God did through this birth, and not just the birth, but the life, death, teaching, and resurrection of Jesus, the whole package, but it began with this one birth in the middle of nowhere, in a town no one had heard of, by a couple. They weren't royalty. Matter of fact, they were the opposite. They were the furthest from it. God took this very ordinary, very plain situation and group of people and did something remarkable to transform the world. I cannot emphasize enough how much this one birth literally transformed the world. And the ripple effects, God is still transforming the world today. And what God is trying to do today in his church in America is to get back to transforming the world, to get back to loving people and proclaiming the gospel and building his kingdom. God is trying to do that today. And we should be doing that in a season of joy, hope, peace, and love. And so this Christmas, let's not, and it's easy to do, let's not get into complaining or being upset. And I get it, it's a stressful time for many people. I was reading credit card data the other day, how much people are spending on gifts on their credit cards, going above their income because they feel obligated to buy for so many people or to spend a certain amount. It is so easy this time of year to get into complaining. And let's just be quite realistic here. Any time of year, it's easy to fall into that rut. But especially this time of year, let's try to focus on the peace, love, joy, and hope that Christ, the King of Peace, brought into the world. And let's keep the complaining at home and lift our hearts to God. And there's something you can do today, and I think this is really helpful because I have a tendency to be a complainer if I let myself. And one of the things I do is I say to God, God, Lord, help me to be the best parent I can be today. Uh, Lord, help me to be the best pastor I can be today. Lord, give me patience. Give me peace. Use me. And notice there's nowhere in that prayer where I'm saying, give me my preferences or wants or desires, or make sure they sing this hymn I learned, grew up with next week. None of that. I just say, God, use me. It makes me think of sorry, I know this is going a bit long, but I would just remember there was this gentleman, and maybe he's watching this today, but he was in his 90s, and it was in a church. And we're getting ready to launch a whole new church within a church, and he was probably the most selfless person I ever met. And he said to me, because I thought he was going to be against it, because this new church would be contemporary. Almost new church, all new church launches, plants, everything since 1970 have been contemporary. So this was contemporary, which was different than what he was used to. And he said to me, he said, uh, you know, I want other people to have what I have in me, and that's Jesus. I don't care what you do, just bring them Jesus. And I thought, that sounds like Mary and Joseph. Anyway, Merry Christmas.